Well, it looks like the floodgates are certainly open now for Microsoft, and it doesn't seem to have caused a huge reaction online like you would expect when something like this happens with a big, you'd say, first party staple from Microsoft, a pillar in the history of Xbox, going to PlayStation 5 and potentially the Switch 2. But I think that's just kind of because people are sort of to this acceptance stage almost with Microsoft. But one thing's for sure, when I say the floodgates are open, I really mean it, because I feel like we're going to hear this many, many more times throughout this year, and we're going to go over that here today. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. Now, of course, I'm talking about Forza Horizon 5. It is heading to PlayStation 5 spring 2025. We don't have an exact release date on this thing. This was an update, a news post they made over on their website the other day. And it did cause some shockwaves, we'll say, through social media, but it wasn't like you'd expect, where it's like, oh my gosh, wow, Forza is going to PlayStation. Now, granted, this isn't the simulation Forza game. This is Forza Horizon. Although I will say for myself, and I'm sure many other people will tell you, the Forza Horizon series is probably, I'm going to say, the preferred one, just because I think it's a lot more fun to play it over the track Forza games. Although the simulation style Forza is pretty much where it began back in 2005 on the original Xbox. But even before that, with Turn 10's formation at Microsoft to create basically a competitor to Gran Turismo. But the Forza name, the franchise, has been with Microsoft since the original Xbox. It is, to me, more storied than even Gears of War, which is clearly a franchise people look at and immediately attach it to Xbox. For me, it goes Halo, then Forza, then Gears, mostly because that's the order I remember them really popping up in. So with Forza being one of the big three, now at least making its way over to PlayStation in some regard here with Horizon, we'll see if the simulation Forza game series moves over to PlayStation. And at this point, anything's possible, because having one of the big three go over really does mean, as Phil Spencer has said, there's no red lines. And Microsoft has certainly said a lot of stuff that's contradicted each other over the last year, and then even beyond that many more times. But what started as originally 4 titles for Microsoft has now ballooned to basically anything or everything. And there's a lot of questions around Microsoft's strategy right now, which we'll get to here in a minute. But with Forza Horizon 5 going over, Panic Button is handling the port, which has, of course, led people to believe that it could also go to the Switch 2, because Panic Button has a lot of history moving some big-time games like Doom, for example, over to the current Switch. So, sure, that absolutely could happen. Think about it. Forza Horizon 5 runs on the Xbox One VCR model from 2013, so surely it could most likely run on the Switch 2 as well. The thing that throws me off about that, analog triggers versus digital, that would be kind of an odd, I guess, experience for a not necessarily complete simulation racing game, but one that certainly would rely on the analog trigger and having different responses for the throttle, say feathering, or like just full-on pedal to the metal rolling through the fields, or just off-roading. But I'm sure it could definitely run it in terms of the technical side of things. So here we are now with Forza Horizon 5, and as we've been hearing, many other games. In fact, as soon as this popped up, we had more and more people continue to double down on other games. Like one that apparently we need to keep an eye out for currently is Gears of War Trilogy remasters that would be coming to PlayStation 5. I didn't say anything about like Switch 2, although again at this point we're waiting for April 2nd to get here for the Direct, when apparently a bunch of third-party publishers can start actually announcing and revealing their games and talking about this system. And then, yeah, we could see Microsoft go off and have Switch 2 logos pop up on all these different games that are already announced. Gears of War Trilogy, though, remasters. That would actually make sense to put on a platform that's never had them. So, yeah, it would make sense for PS5. Yes, it would make sense for Switch 2. And yes, it would look just weird. Now, this is coming from Exta's One, who they've been hot and cold with some of their information they've put out there. But I mean, if there really are no red lines, as Phil has said, and what they've proven so far with Forza now going to the PS5, Yeah, I'm sure Gears of War could absolutely be going over with this trilogy to introduce the PlayStation user base to, again, a storied franchise from them. To go a bit further, Vandal also had a report that was published with Starfield, Fable, Microsoft Flight Simulator, all going to PS5 and Switch 2, according to their source. Fable is an interesting one because it's not out yet. So not only do we have games from Microsoft's past releases that are already available now on Xbox going to PlayStation 5, but games that maybe just day and date release Xbox, PS5, Switch 2, and it doesn't necessarily matter which ones they are, whether it is a Fable or if it's something from Activision Blizzard or something from Bethesda. Like, think about right now what we're looking towards for the PS5 from Microsoft just in the first half of this year. So we have Indiana Jones, that's spring on the PS5. Doom: The Dark Ages, that's coming up in May, so still in the first half. And then we would have Forza, that also spring. So we see Microsoft indeed moving in the direction of trying to make Xbox more profitable by seeking out more people to sell these games to, where Game Pass doesn't necessarily exist. And that's been a big topic of conversation. How has the Xbox economy, if you will, the marketplace there, the consumer spending tendencies been affected by Game Pass? Because, I mean, when you see it with what they're doing now, clearly they need to bring in more money for the budgets that they're putting out, which they're holding up many, many studios right now, a ton. And that, along with Activision Blizzard, of course, Call of Duty probably works to hold up all of Activision Blizzard on its own. But still, with how much money they put out there and trying to recoup that investment, yeah, you're going to see this, I think, consistently across the board, which does eventually lead us to Halo, of course. And we can see places like Windows Central doubling down on their report that Halo is gearing up for a PlayStation debut. Nate has mentioned it as going to PlayStation 5 and the Switch 2, that being Master Chief Collection, which, once again, makes a lot of sense for Microsoft to move over if this is their plan going forward, to where the next big Halo game will appear on screen with an Xbox and a PlayStation logo, bare minimum, maybe with the Switch 2 as well, and then cross-play across the board, as I think that will also be a very important staple for them in terms of these releases with the feature set, trying to have all these people play together at once. That's something they're going to be doing for Forza Horizon 5, just cross-play across the board. So in Microsoft's mind, yes, they seem like they are understanding as to where their hardware is currently, which, I mean, we see it every time they do an investors report, like they have their financials together. Microsoft in general, almost $70 billion in a quarter. Absolutely ridiculous. And it does seem like Microsoft is actually making more money on their Xbox brand, but they're selling less hardware. Now, currently, that has a lot to do with them having bought Activision Blizzard, which heavily spiked their sales report. I mean, the number obviously jumped through the roof, but now they're settling back in, and they're comparing year over year, and it's up 2%, despite hardware being down another 30%. It's a consistent number they see, where it's like down 20%, down 30% in terms of hardware sales, but the actual revenue generated is staying almost flat in that entire time frame, which sort of puts their strategy in motion to make sense in their mind. Okay, so yeah, they're going to sell less Xbox consoles as it stands now. The thing I've noticed, though, with Microsoft is, let me know if you've noticed this, it feels like every generation, well, the past 2 generations, I should say, they've had to shift strategy halfway through. Clearly, they did with the Xbox One. Their initial plan that they presented versus where they ended up with, not even close. Like, they had to backtrack a lot of stuff. The thing was, it was out of the gate with its shoes tied together. It was rough for the Xbox One, and then they shifted gears a bit there halfway through with Game Pass. Then here comes the Xbox Series, which seemed to be more of a traditional console with Game Pass attached to it. And now they're shifting gears once again halfway through, where their console-exclusive first-party games are moving to other hardware platform holders like PlayStation and like Nintendo. So it does make me think what their next-generation offering really will be, if this is currently where they're standing, as it seems to affect their next generation clearly, their we talk about mid-gen refreshes. They're mid-gen strategy refresh almost for business. And it does kind of make sense if they are going to make less and less systems themselves, like hardware, to open it up and allow other companies to make Xbox consoles. And Microsoft really does fall back into a position of kind of where they are on PC side. They are a software company at heart, and their biggest thing on the PC side, their biggest contribution is Windows. And it's not necessarily the hardware. Sure, they do Windows and Surface and stuff, but the big thing they do is provide Windows OS for other hardware manufacturers to make PC. And I kind of feel like that might be their strategy, as has been alluded to and talked about and stuff, for next generation, where they will provide an OS level, like a console level OS that's more standardized across the board for all these companies to use, whether they want to target a lower end system, a higher end system. And AMD, I guess, just worked to create a almost universal chip, like they have the Z1 Extreme for handhelds. Maybe there'll be something like that for consoles. And I do wonder if this would drive more innovation in a sense, because you would have something like Lenovo Legion Go show up that's weird because it has almost like a Joy-Con sort of effect to it. Or then you have more standardized ones like the ROG Ally, and then they play around with the RAM maybe and the battery. And I'm trying to think of that on a on like a console level. Although I guess most likely they'd all use Xbox controllers. That's what the console OS is built for. There's so many questions around that even being a possibility in the first place. But I do think people's concerns right now, because I see people asking, what's the big deal? Why are people worried? The answer's simple. People are worried that the Xbox console itself will eventually become unnecessary, and then that ends up being the biggest expense almost for Microsoft, the R&D, the time, and the cost for it just about evens out what they sell it for. It's not high margin. So why do they keep doing it then? Why do they keep making it? Do they eventually pull the plug and say, well, we make plenty of money just providing software for other manufacturers to make Xboxes and for PlayStation and on the Nintendo system? So I understand why people are concerned around it, because then what happens to your digital library? What happens to your profile, your achievements, your friends list, all these things you've built up over what's now become decades? Yeah, it makes sense why people are concerned about it in that regard. So at this time, Microsoft says they're going to continue making consoles. It is, I'll admit, hard to take them at face value just based on them shifting back and forth with things they've said over the past couple years now. But at this time, we need to see what their next generation plan, their next generation offering is. And then I feel like we can kind of judge it from there and try to figure out where their future lies. I will say, based on their hardware sales, it actually makes sense for them to start thinking about launching next generation holiday 2026, which means by the end of this year, we probably will hear about leaks and rumors, and maybe Microsoft themselves just coming out and saying, yeah, guys, get ready. In a year, we're going to have our next generation platform ready to go and released. And then we'll see what they have at that time. But for now, every time you see Microsoft talk about a first-party game, I guess assume it's heading to PlayStation or Switch 2 in the near future after its initial release, or maybe even day one, depending on the title. But let me know what you guys think about this down below when it comes to Microsoft really getting out of the exclusives game. And do you think this is something that will benefit them in the long run? Or do you think this is them like a pivot point where they'll actually end up sinking their gaming division at the end of it all? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.